Backlogs almost feel like an inevitability nowadays, given how saturated with content the gaming industry's become. The full worth of the gaming industry is a staggering $214.2 billion, and as impressive as that is, it's incredibly apparent as to why that's the case. Video games are an all-encompassing form of entertainment. The medium appeals to art buffs, cinema buffs, basement dwellers, chads, betas, sigmas, kids, adults, men, women, no matter who or what you are, there is likely going to be a video game or two that you think back on rather fondly. What's more impressive though is just how young this form of media is. Film was seen as something of a niche art form back in the turn of the 20th century that was primarily consumed by the wealthy and didn't really make its way into the mainstream culture until probably around the 1930s with films like King Kong. Video games started out similarly niche. You'd be fairly hard-pressed to find a comprehensive article discussing table tennis, but it didn't take long for arcade cabinets to begin littering malls and even having dedicated facilities to game in. Fast forward to the year 2024, and video games are a titan of the entertainment industry. And it doesn't appear to be slowing down anytime soon, at least not without another historic video game crash. The market is absolutely flooded with all kinds of games, to the point that many are handed out on a regular basis via subscription-based services like PlayStation Plus, Nintendo Switch Online, and Xbox Games Pass. It's not at all hard to begin racking up piles of games that you fail to finish just because you don't have the time. Life happens, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it can be frustrating to look back on your list of games you've yet to complete and see that it spans a total of, wait, how much do I have? 2, 3... 111?! I have been playing lots of video games lately, and I have quite a bit to say about, well, most of them. So I figured, what the heck? Why not make some content out of it, talking about what I did and did not enjoy? To be clear, these are not meant to be taken as full-fledged reviews, just a catalog of impressions that these games have made on me throughout my time playing them. Some games I have very little to say about. In fact, a lot of the earlier entries in this series are going to be relatively quick summaries of what I thought. However, some of these games left such an impression on me that I couldn't help but give a rather extensive look at them. And don't worry, when I say extensive, I'm talking anywhere between 10 minutes to sometimes half an hour, maybe a bit more if I'm really into it. Trust me, I'm not about to make a series of 111 5-hour videos. I just don't have it in me. I completed the first game of my backlog on August 7th of 2023, and since then I've been chipping away at it one game at a time. At the time of recording for this first video, I've completed a total of 31 games and have just finished Cyberpunk 2077. I should also add that I've been playing several other games quite extensively, which I will also be giving my thoughts on. They weren't a part of the backlog, I just felt like playing them for one reason or another and thought it would make for some fun additional content. So yeah, I'm actually going to be going over even more games than the 111 that was originally planned. Yeah, you're welcome. I've also got an additional project that I'm working on, albeit I don't even know if I intend to make content regarding it, but I thought it'd be fun to mention throughout this series nonetheless. I also have a backlog of games that I want to get the Platinum trophies for. Of course, not every game on this list is a PlayStation 3, 4, or 5 title, but for the majority that are, I'll be logging my interest in coming back for the Platinum trophy. And heck, some games I may just come back to for the hell of it. We'll just have to wait and see. Also, one last thing that needs to be made clear, I did not play all of these games to completion. So far, I've only dropped one of these games at the time of recording this, but that was after 11 hours of boredom and frustration. Bear in mind, the average runtime of this game is approximately 40 hours, give or take, so while my thoughts on a game that I haven't beaten obviously won't be particularly extensive, I'm still more than entitled to say what I please. Turns out you can start playing something, decide you don't enjoy it, and choose not to play it again. Crazy, right? And hey, I'm a pretty determined dude. I've played some pretty bad games to completion. Heck, I've played some bad games multiple times over, and even for hours that pierce the triple digits. So for me to refuse to continue playing something should probably say plenty in its own right. And if you disagree with what I have to say on said game, hey, that's totally fine. I know plenty of people who haven't completed games that I love, Lucy. But enough preamble. Without further ado, let's start off with the game that kicked off this quest of mine, Dead Island Definitive Edition.
You ain't scared. Yeah.
Dead Island is a game that I played a lot of in high school, and though it's by no means a perfect game, I still found myself really enjoying it all these years later. It's interesting because the mechanics are deceptively expansive, and it has plenty of superficial appeal, from the satisfying crunch of killing blows to the overall aesthetic of the island, but the lack of polish and the even more lackluster mission design definitely hold it back from reaching its potential. The game functions well as a beautiful sandbox with a ton of fun toys to play around with, especially in co-op, but it definitely suffers from that AA budget, which has become the gaming equivalent to being a B movie. It might be something of a hidden gem, but there's no denying that it is a bit rough around the edges. The story is also pretty bad, with characters falling surprisingly flat thanks to the lack of meaningful or even colorful characterization, and overall just wooden performances. Everyone knows and loves Sam B, and Phil Lamar is always great, but the writing and presentation do absolutely nothing to elevate what could have been a great band of zombie-killing characters. Though I will say that intro cinematic is always going to be legendary. Who Do You Voodoo is unironically such heat. Dead Island's a fun time, and I think I'll be coming back to this for my Platinum backlog. I got the original Dead Island's Platinum, so, I mean, hey, I might as well come back for this one also. 6 out of 10, Dead Island is pretty good and has a lot to love about despite its issues. Riptide is glorified DLC, 100%. But I will say it's still a fun time if you enjoy Dead Island. The story has kind of a dumb cliffhanger, but otherwise it's more or less on par with the first games, just slightly better characters, I guess. Truth be told, there's not much to say that I didn't have to say about the first game, which, again, Riptide is basically a massive DLC for. The new enemy types are a mixed bag, drowners are more annoying than interesting, the hazmat things were such non-threats that I couldn't be bothered to remember what they're even called, and the wrestlers, well, they were actually pretty cool. I liked them. The final boss was also kinda cool, but way too bullet spongy. The base defense missions were also pretty boring and kind of underdeveloped. The inclusion of a 5th playable character was really cool, and I do like the weapon skill levels. Some of the new weapon types felt pretty mid, like the fist weapons, but others were very welcome additions, like the chainsaw and the harpoon gun. The setting also felt pretty lackluster compared to the first games, which I felt was at the very least well constructed enough to feel memorable and realistic, at least until you reach the jungle, then it just kinda sucks ass. So yeah, Riptide is a pretty mixed bag. 5 out of 10, basically the same as the first game, just more stuff that I didn't care for and a couple new things I liked, sort of. I don't think I'll be going for this Platinum, but I do think I'll come back to it, if anything, just to chill out and have fun with. Dead Island is one of those series that is just kind of a comfort food for me. I feel like I can drop in and play them at basically any time, and I can just have fun with it. It's a good way to kill a couple of hours and just enjoy a bit of zombie killing. I really enjoyed revisiting Assassin's Creed Revelations. A lot of people say Brotherhood is the best Ezio game, and honestly I get it, but I consider 2 and Revelations both to be better entries. That's not even to say that Brotherhood is a bad game, far from it. I just prefer AC2 and Revelations. Don't get me wrong, Revelations is far from perfect, as is the case with really any Assassin's Creed that's not Origins. The controls are still wonky, as tends to be the case with AC games, thanks to the use of proximity-based animations in conjunction with a system revolving around movement that is intended to be both brisk and satisfying. And the story involving the Byzantine takeover of Constantinople is definitely only there to give Ezio more to do as he searches for the Masyaf keys. Also, Roxulu was criminally underutilized given his place in history. Like, the dude is a beast, why was he not more prominent? But I will say that everything involving Sofia, as well as Altair and Ezio's arcs, oh my god. 10 out of 10, fantastic storytelling. And the ending, oh my God, what a conclusion. It perfectly wraps up the story of the first two assassins that we were lucky enough to have grace this franchise. And the modern day story, while minimal, also had major strong points. Subject 16, aka Clay, is a genuinely stellar character, especially thanks to the Lost Archives, which also revealed Lucy's role as a triple agent for the Templars and why she needed to die in Brotherhood. And the climax of the main story revealing to Desmond the coming solar flares that would end civilization, and the efforts that the Isu made to ensure humanity had a chance to survive, it's just such a perfect lead-in to Assassin's Creed 3, which unfortunately would crap the bed in its final minutes, but that's a rant for a couple of minutes from now. Actually. Assassin's Creed Revelations is definitely a shorter game, but it plays 100% to its strengths and knows exactly what to give its audience as both the finale to the Ezio trilogy and a transitional piece into what was originally supposed to be the story's conclusive entry. It's a fantastic conclusion for a fantastic trilogy. Funny enough, it's the only Ezio game I've yet to get the Platinum trophy for, so yeah, I think I'm gonna come back for that one. I still think Assassin's Creed 2 is the best Ezio game overall, if only because the story was so damn good, but Revelations is not far behind in terms of my sheer love and appreciation for the narrative work. 8 out of 10, seriously, I love Assassin's Creed Revelations. Like I said, it is the perfect cap-off to a very strong trilogy of games, and not to mention the perfect tone setter for what was to come. So, Red Dead Redemption 2 was not a part of my backlog. However, around the time that I was playing AC Rev, I just kinda got the itch to replay some Red Dead. And honestly, I'm so happy that I did. Red Dead Redemption 2 rules. Don't get me wrong, it's by no means perfect, the controls are still kind of finicky, mission design is on the whole far from impressive despite the awesome set pieces, and Chapter 5 is, it's kinda duty. But aside from that, you'll be hard-pressed to find any major issues with the game overall. Arthur Morgan is regarded as one of the best protagonists in video games for a reason. The man's simultaneously as outrageously lovable and goofy as he is sincerely complex and irreparably troubled. It's painful to see a person so genuinely good that can't escape the consequences of their bad decisions. You know, when it's actually written super well, unlike other games with the number 2 in them. It's not that Arthur deserves what he got, but there was never going to be a happy ending with the life that he was living. I don't want to spend too much time talking about Red Dead 2 since it wasn't really part of my backlog, but I wanted to highlight it for being such an outstanding game, as was the first Red Dead Redemption. If you somehow haven't played these games yet, you really are doing yourself a disservice because the storytelling and character work here is utterly remarkable. I'm probably not about to go for the Platinum trophy because Jesus Christ, but I can say this is easily among my favorite games that I've ever played. For those who don't know, my brother's favorite game was Red Dead Redemption, so it feels somewhat bittersweet to go through Arthur's story knowing that my brother will never get to see it. But there's also something about getting to play as John Marston again in the epilogue and postgame that gives the whole ride a full circle feeling of conclusiveness that I personally can't get with any other game. It's like I'm right back in 2010 watching my big bro ride around through the Old West and shoot up some outlaws and banditos. I hope that wasn't too depressing, but yeah, as you can imagine, the game means a great deal to me, and so I really wanted to give it a mention since I replayed it in the midst of this backlog. And hey, I've got plenty of other bonus games to throw in, so who knows what else will come up. But for now, back to the backlog. I've always felt Assassin's Creed 3 was an underrated game, and while I still stand by that, I can't deny that it has major problems. It was the first AC game to run on a new engine, and it definitely shows. Textures are surprisingly lacking, even for a remaster, which is weird, given how good the Ezio trilogy looks for the most part, and that collection came out like 3 years before AC3 got remastered. Animations don't always sync properly, and sometimes they just go utterly haywire. The game crashed on me multiple times, the approximation system which the parkour hinges upon is still very wonky at times, enemy AI is really basic, the horses are garbage, as are most animals in the game, load times are surprisingly long even on the PlayStation 5, it just feels so low effort compared to the Ezio trilogy, which holds up pretty well on a technical level, or at the very least as well as a remaster can really be expected. There are also some story issues, primarily with the modern day plot, which basically falls apart at the 11th hour despite being actually pretty strong for the first 99% of the game's runtime. It baffles me that they would put so much work into setting up Desmond only to throw him away and completely undo everything the modern plot was working to achieve. The original series director wanted the games to build to Desmond becoming a master assassin, but it's clear that Ubisoft had other intentions, and it's apparent why the modern day story of every game post AC3 struggles as much as they do. That being said, the game is honestly pretty fun when putting all of that aside. Radun Hagedun is an awesome protagonist, and I've really come to appreciate the morally gray approach to the Assassin-Templar conflict that Assassin's Creed 3 and the Kenway saga took, which, for the duration of the Ezio trilogy, was very plainly black and white. The first game at least had Al-Mualim turning heel, but until we get an AC1 remaster, I'm just going to refuse to acknowledge it. Hashtag remaster AC Uno. Haytham is easily the best antagonist in the series, with Al-Mualim, Cesare Borgia, Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, and even Charles Lee honestly not even coming close. His charisma is magnetic, and he steals every single scene that he is in, and his chemistry with Radun Hagedun is genuinely so compelling that I wish we could have gotten more of it. Not because there wasn't enough, but because it was just that good. Radun Hagedun was also just a nice breath of fresh air after 3 games with Ezio. That's not to say that Ezio even had his issues, he's literally one of the best protagonists in video games, and not to mention an exemplar of how to do a video game protagonist almost perfectly, but I appreciated that Radun Hagedun wasn't just a carbon copy of Ezio or even Altair. His naivety and idealism make for a great way of allowing the more respectable attributes of the Templars' ideology to be brought into the limelight, while also exposing the cracks in the assassin's philosophy, and obviously doing so with Haytham was fantastic in its own right. Radun Hagedun also gets points for growth, often making mistakes that stem from his idealism, which other characters, not even just the Templars, are quick to point out. It's nice to have a protagonist who means well, but doesn't always do well. And he really comes into his own by the end, having realized the importance in carving his own path, rather than following those set by others who seek only to control him, even if they do ultimately care for him in their own ways. It's thematically appropriate for a game set in the American Revolution. Speaking of which, I love this setting. Don't know if I would have played the signing of the Declaration of Independence off as casually as they did here, and George Washington feels strangely absent despite being such a focus for basically every other character. But otherwise, I think they did a pretty good job in bringing the era to life. It was very refreshing to have a balance of parkour across both urban and rural environments, whereas previous Assassin's Creed games felt very samey in their settings, at least in regards to the parkour. Don't get me wrong, Assassin's Creed 1, 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations all have really good maps, but it's undeniable that they're all basically old cities. Like, there's no real wildlife or much surrounding them. There's a little bit surrounding Rome and Brotherhood, but it's mostly just flat plains, and the horse system is also not very good in that game. But anyways, as far as Assassin's Creed 3 goes, also, I just gotta say, Charles Lee was an awesome villain. Like I said, nowhere near as good as Haytham, obviously, but still a right bastard that I couldn't wait to put an end to. So yeah, 6 out of 10. The game's far from perfect, but I still enjoy it a lot. I still haven't played The Tyranny of King Washington, so I don't think I can honestly say I'll be going for the platinum, but I may change my mind. But before I get around to any more Assassin's Creed, because God, there's so many of these games, I wanted to get around to some other games first. Prototype is, to me, the king of 7th gen superhero games. Don't get me wrong, Infamous slaps, Crackdown slaps, the Batman Arkham games are fantastic, yes, even Origins. Saints Row 4 exists, but Prototype Dude, Prototype got that dog in it, you know what I mean? I think I personally prefer the first game, albeit for pretty minute reasons like being able to hold your charge jump as long as you want before finally releasing, but I can still pick up Prototype 2 any day of the week. James Heller is straight up one of the funniest protagonists in any video game, and God bless Cornell for his work here. This man deserves to be president. Heller T'Challa team up win. I don't even know how to really describe Prototype. Like I said, it's kind of a superhero game, but it's also kind of not. It's just, it's kind of like they took Splatterhouse and mixed it with a Spider-Man game, kind of. Like, it's seriously so weird to describe, but it's so awesome. Like, seriously, you've got to play Prototype to understand it. Also, check out White Light's videos on Prototype. They're the peak Prototype content on YouTube as far as I'm concerned. I'm definitely adding Prototype 1 and 2 to my Platinum backlog. I just adore these games, honestly. They're far from perfect, but they're just so fun that I can't be bothered to even care. 7 out of 10. When are we getting Prototype 3? For the love of God, let us play as Pariah already, you emo fuck! I miss old God of War. The fun and chaotic gameplay, the challenge of higher difficulties, the insanely cool weapons, the impressive enemy variety, the absolute batshit insanity of the story, the surprisingly well-crafted puzzles. God of War 3 is still the peak of the series in my opinion. I'll be getting around to God of War 4 eventually, but I gotta say, I'm honestly not looking forward to it after having played 3 again, because I find God of War 4, and I guess Ragnarok by extension, I find their gameplay so boring compared to the original Greek series. Don't get me wrong, OG God of War was far from Devil May Cry, but it was still a standout, bombastic hack and slash with an epic story and instantly memorable characters. And not to mention just insane set pieces, especially God of War 3. God of War 3 is just non-stop. It runs at a breakneck pace and doesn't relent for even a minute. Okay, that's actually not entirely true. There are obviously puzzles to break up the pacing, but that's a good thing. But everything is just so well conjoined that the whole adventure feels really seamless, and man, these boss fights. Don't even get me started. Poseidon, Hades, Zeus, dude, this game's awesome. Alright, it's so badass. You won't hear me agreeing with Under the Mayo on many things, but I will say this, I completely agree with him as far as God of War goes. OG God of War, I don't think it's as good as Mayo thinks, but I think it's really good. I think I'd give it a 7. 7 out of 10. What an awesome game to cap off this series. At least, you know, before Ascension came out. I won't be going for the Platinum because I hate some of the trophies on this list, but I'll definitely be replaying this for some time. You know what's funny? Looking back on my writing and my notes for this, I actually, I put that I wanted a remaster for the original God of Wars, and just recently that was announced. So, hey, that could be really cool. Honestly, it is kind of weird that it's taken this long to get remasters of the old games. I mean, Sony went out of their way to get all of the God of War games at the time on the PS3, so it's very interesting to me that they've taken this long to get them over to the PS4 and PlayStation 5, and not to mention PC, which has only the new God of War, which is really weird. I'm just saying. Alright, that's 6 games, 7 counting Red Dead 2 down, and about 105 to go, not counting the bonus games. So, yeah, if you enjoyed this, you know, do the whole like, the subscribbles and all that. This is going to be a fun series. And I will be streaming some of these games from time to time also. Stick around for more. I'll see you again soon.